welcome, and welcome Amy and Jenny, and we'll get going.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for bearing with us through a little technical difficulty. So this is day 2 of a training that we're so excited. Yesterday we did See Me, and today the focus is on Understand Me, which we'll explain a little bit more about what that means. So as always, I know there's a Google Classroom that's been set up for you. We love to share our materials, and we're not proprietary about that. So you can visit the Padlet that's within the Google Classroom and be able to access all of the handouts as well as the presentation.
So briefly, I know most of you heard this yesterday, but this book came about because basically we are just so passionate about making efforts to meet the academic and affective needs of gifted learners in general. But as we progress through our careers, we've just become so aware of amazing high potential and gifted students in classrooms who didn't fit the traditional gifted mold. And because of that, we're often overlooked when it came to opportunities for gifted education programming or advanced academic programming. With this book, we had a fun, unique opportunity to share with others what we had learned through our careers in the classrooms, from working with other educators and from working with K-12 students. So that was the point of this, to share strategies that we had experienced, that we'd seen that worked well with these learners. That being said, we too are still very much in a learning phase with all of this. We're growing every day when it comes to how to fully understand and discuss some of these topics. So we just want to be very, very upfront about that.
So Amy, this is you.
This is me. Okay, so these are the groups of students that we are addressing when we talk about underserved high potential learners. Students from culturally and linguistically diverse background, students who are learning English, whose primary home language is something other than English, students from homes that would be considered economically disadvantaged, twice exceptional students, and then we talk about rural students from under-resourced areas in our book. We don't call them out as a specific group in what we're doing here with you, but the strategies we feel like are very applicable to those students as well.
And we are just going to go through this quickly because we know many of you were at yesterday's session. Yesterday was See Me. So we talked about just ways to acknowledge our bias, to see potentials, in our underserved learners and potential identification issues. Today, we want to talk to you about understanding who these students are, creating culturally responsive learning environments that will help these students thrive. We hope you'll join us on October 14th for our session on Teach Me, where we talk about instructional strategies to support underserved learners. And then on the 15th for Challenge Me, where we share strategies for appropriately challenging our students, and we're going to try to put in some advocacy material in there as well.
So this is the quote that we chose to open our chapter on Understand Me. Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. And that just really resonated with us. So when we're talking about gifted individuals, this is a very broad term. Anybody that is in the field of gifted education tends to recognize that at this point, at least to a degree. For every characteristic that we have when we're talking about gifted students, some of them are going to already exhibit those characteristics, some don't. You can see it in some of them, some you don't. Some will eventually demonstrate those characteristics and behavior, some never will. Some will be able to do some of what we expect of gifted learners, some will not be able to. At some point, some are going to demonstrate things that they can't do now or that they don't exhibit now. They'll develop those strengths. Some are never going to be able to. So just with any characteristic list, it's important to recognize that it's not all inclusive, that they're generalizations. They're based on something important that is true about many of the students, but they're not all encompassing and they don't apply to every student in every situation. There's also discussion within the field of gifted education that when we say gifted, are we talking about who these individuals are inherently as people, or are we talking about what they're able to show us that they can do? There's no 100% agreement on that. So with that, knowing that, we just think it's so very important that the gifted label not be the determining factor in what kind of programming, what kind of activities, what kind of services these students receive. A lack of a gifted label should never prevent a child from receiving additional support and or challenge that is necessary for him or her to do all that they can within our schools and classrooms. Whole gifted child is something that we feel we filter everything through in the work that we do. I know from yesterday, some of the conversation, this is a familiar term. This concept is familiar to you, but we still just wanted to call it out briefly. It bears repeating that unless we are truly looking at the child as a whole person, we're never going to be able to fully support them in their growth and development. So what we have here are two conceptions of what looking at the whole gifted child means, both from pioneers in the field of gifted education. The first one is from Anne Marie Roper. She says a child is a total entity, combination of many characteristics, and the emotions cannot be treated separately from intellectual awareness or physical development. And we know that when there are social emotional things that are going on or affective things going on, it's really, really difficult to get to the academic with kids, that they have to be in a good place with these other things. All intertwine and influence each other. A gifted 5-year-old does not function or think like an average 10-year-old, nor does this child feel like an average 4 or 5-year-old. These children's thoughts and emotions differ, and as a result, they perceive and react to their worlds differently. We very much like this definition, this explanation of what a gifted child is. It's looking at the whole being when we're talking about giftedness, not just academic achievement or IQ score. The other one we shared is from Dr. George Betts and Dr. Blanche Capuchin. In Dr. Betts' last book that he did on autonomous learner model, he passed away a little over a year and a half ago, but he and Capuchin and Carey put out a new book on resources for the autonomous learner model. And within that, they included this visual of what they perceived as the whole gifted child. And in this conception, our goal is to develop or help students work toward becoming autonomous lifelong learners. But in order for that to happen, all of these other things have to come into play, have to be addressed and supported by the adults around them. The emotional well-being, the social well-being, intellectual and cognitive well-being, and the physical well-being or the health of the student. So we just felt like this was a great way to kind of start off this discussion of understanding. This is actually something that we included from when I was facilitating gifted education programs. As I met with kids, I would ask them to tell us, we would tell them, we know so much about you. We know more about you than we've ever known about kids in the past. We have so much data about every aspect of your lives. We have your test scores. We have years and years of test scores of all different kinds in all different areas. So we know about you from your grades and your test scores. What else is it that you really want your teachers to know about you? For this to be a good year for you to grow and develop, what else do you want your teachers to know about you? And then I would share that information with their teachers, and consistently the teachers felt like this was some of the most important information that they got about their students. So throughout the book, we pulled just little quotes from from past students. These are actual students who have responded, and who would also be considered one of the underrepresented populations in our book. So the first one that we grabbed to pull in here says, "I'm quiet when I don't know or when I just don't want to speak out. So sometimes it seems that I don't know. And I'm sometimes shy to ask for help, but I will try to find help because I don't like not knowing." Second one we pulled out, "There are many things that are bringing down my self-esteem and have been embarrassing me or putting me under stress. For example, I have trouble getting enough sleep to get to school on time, and I tend to wait until passing period to go to school so that I do not have to walk into a hall or into a class that has already started." So just examples of when you really dig in and you're trying to understand what makes kids function the way they're functioning. What are their strengths? What are their needs? What are their challenges? Asking them, what is it you want us to know, is really powerful. And these are things that we would not have known about these two particular kids. That was really helpful then in our interactions with them, the rest of our time with them.
So we want to frame the rest of the discussion of Understand Me around creating a culturally responsive classroom. Educators need to establish a safe space where teaching is student-centered, where there are high expectations for all students, and where the strengths of everyone involved in the educational process are recognized, appreciated, and utilized. We are very, very strengths focused in helping students be able to see and know what their strengths are, understand what their strengths are. And we'll talk also about family strengths because we also believe that's extremely important. So when we're talking about a culturally responsive classroom today, we're going to talk to you about 4 primary areas. So we're going to talk to you about creating connections, which we love. How many people yesterday mentioned connections several different times. We're going to talk about building a safe and inclusive environment. We're also going to talk about conveying and supporting high expectations for our students. And then lastly, we're going to talk about providing opportunities for meaningful engagement. And then within these areas, we'll have 2 different opportunities for you to break out and talk about, how you do some of this work. So connections, when we talk about connections, Amy and I talk about connections a lot in our own research and our teaching, providing opportunities for students to build meaningful connections with you, other students, the school, the curriculum, and to their future goals and dreams. This encourages increased academic and emotional growth for underserved and for all students. So when we talk about connections or how we envision that, we can never just emphasize enough caring adults in the lives of children and how important it is to them to have that person that's really rooting for them and has their best interests at heart and wants to see them shine. So connections to those caring adults in their lives, to their peers around them, in classes, outside of classes, in the halls, to their learning, to feel that what they're learning, they have the self-efficacy, the belief that they're capable of learning what they're learning, that their learning is relevant to some aspect of their lives potentially, and to the future. To be able to make those connections, to envision a future for themselves where, learning matters, and to really feel connected to whatever that their future self will be. And through all of these connections, it's so incredibly important that we respect their identity, their lived experiences, and help them grow, as learners through these different connections while always honoring who they are. So we want to give you this presentation. We're going to give you more activities than we did in the last presentation. And then the teaching presentation will give you even more activities, and all of the activities will be available in the Padlet. So we want to talk to you a little bit about fostering connections. So we need to work to create connections by focusing on the similarities among our students while also recognizing, valuing, and honoring their inherent diversity. So it's nice for students to be able to have that camaraderie, to feel like there are other students that they share similar life experiences in common with, similar interests in common with. But we also have to have that other piece where they feel comfortable, sharing who they are, where their diverse experiences can be recognized. They know that they're valued beyond feeling, and that they are honored and respected. And some ways that, we recognize, value, honor inherent diversity, we need to consider family history, family traditions, cultural background, home language, interest in and outside of school. That helps us see our children, like Amy talked about with the whole child. It gives us more information in order to help them make, those connections within the classroom, so that we can really feel connected, more connected with them, that we're not just teaching kind of this academic, cognitive like area, but we're teaching this entire child. We need to ensure that references and connections to students' backgrounds, lives, and cultures are evident in our classroom consistently. This is not just a once a week, once a month, and we're probably preaching to the choir here, we're sure. But these are things that need to be seamlessly interwoven into the curriculum, not just on special days or holidays. We should always be cognizant of how we can foster these types of connections. We need to provide safe opportunities for students to share important moments in their lives, both in and out of school. This shouldn't be a high pressure situation where we're forcing students to feel this way. We should build a safe enough community in our classroom, and we'll share ideas for that momentarily, where students are excited to bring in, these important moments and share them with others within the classroom. We need to offer safe, you'll see the word safe a lot, safe opportunities for students to showcase their strengths, passions, goals, and to share their diverse backgrounds. So again, not, putting students on the spot like you need to do this, not high pressure, but giving them choices and how they showcase, these different things like to us is really important. We need to strive to understand our students' lived experiences and unique perspectives. And again, we're really excited to share a couple of activities with you that will touch on that. We need to partner as equals with family members in support of students. As teachers, we see part of a child. Families most certainly see another huge part of their children. So to just be islands and think that we have all the information we need to support a student is doing an injustice to that student. So we need to partner with families in order to fully understand who that student is and what they need to be successful. We need to develop a culture of respect and open communication between you and your students, their families, other educators, and community members integral in students' lives. And model, that's a modeling experience. And we're showing them that we're a united front, that we're working together to really support them. So this is just one way to start to get at, family strengths and learn more about your students outside of the classroom. So before I go over this particular activity with you, I'm just going to give you a few bullets. So we need to demonstrate an openness to learning about and from students and their families. I just love this quote. We love this quote. So educators who are knowledgeable about their students' families' lives are better prepared to understand the children's in-school behavior and to incorporate into classroom activities the funds of knowledge those families possess. And I love that terminology, the funds of knowledge that those families possess. Trying to find family strengths and really understand those. I think sometimes unintentionally we become, deficit focused, or we try to place blame. And this is reframing. This is, becoming partners with families and realizing, the integral part that they play in their child's lives and development. So just as we must strive to validate the strengths of our underserved learners, we must also focus on family strengths. So this is just some of the questions on the family identity survey that we created. You could see the full survey in the Padlet, but how do you define the word family? Based on your personal definition of family, who are the members of your family? Please describe each family member in as little or as much detail as you like. So we're not forcing a definition of family or who those members of the family need to be. We're keeping that really open. Which family members does the student spend the most time with? What do you value as a family? What do you value? What are some of your traditions? Do you know where any of these traditions come from? What holidays do you celebrate? How do you celebrate these? And there's even just more questions just to understand how families function outside of school to support their students. This is another activity that's just the student would complete. So this is more visual. So we have, this tree, and this is reproducible, where the leaves would represent the students' interests and passions. The branches would be the goals that they have for them. It could be short-term goals, long-term goals. The trunk is their strengths, their talents, their gifts. And I love this idea of the roots, where it's like, where do you get your strengths from? Like, where does that come from? This is a great higher level critical thinking activity. I think sometimes we might just ask students, and I think this came up yesterday, what are your strengths? What are you good at? And they don't know, or they don't want to say. So this isn't something we would force them to do right away and say, okay, you have to have it done. This is something they could take, they could think about, they could have time, they could come back to, they could add to. You could even do this as a class and put up a big visual and come up with everybody's passions and their goals and their strengths and the origins of their strengths. And this is a great way to really foster that community within a classroom.
I have one more comment on the tree that Jenny just shared too. Another idea is that students may have two versions. It's a great, like Jenny said, deep processing, higher level thinking activity. So they may have one where they brainstorm everything, and that's their personal one that they're keeping track of, and then another one that they're willing to share with the public. So again, we want them to process that information, but make it a safe enough space where they're only sharing what they're comfortable sharing. So they might have two versions of that. This particular activity, Recipe for Success, this was developed by a colleague of mine when I was in the public schools. I did a recipe for success. So great minds go. Well, and just like everything in education, is anything ever really, really unique? We build and we borrow and we just make things better and better. Teachers are so good at that. But what she has done, same idea as what I was doing with students to find out as much as we could about them beyond test scores and assessments. She would use this at open house or back to school night and share it with grandparents or parents, any family members that came. And then beyond that, she would also make sure that it got home to families if they weren't able to attend. But she felt like this was just a really non-threatening way. It was neighborly. A recipe card's informal, and it was something that they could use and fill out, and then she could learn more about how families perceived the students, the children in their homes, the students in her classroom. So there's a place for the name, the information of the person that's filling it out, the adult that's filling it out, and then she asks for their key ingredients. What is it that I should know about your child? What are the key ingredients that make up your child that we might not be seeing here? And then on the back side, it's upside down. Jenny had the great idea of typing it out to the side for us over there. Getting to know your child requires more than looking at test scores and grades. Could you help me? Tell me a story about the first time you realized your child had unique gifts or abilities. And some of the stories she got back and shared with me were just amazing, just unbelievable. So this was something that we felt was very simple for families to complete, but really impactful for, I think, for families, but also for the educators that then got that information back from these cards. And we are at our first breakout activity. So I know yesterday we asked you if 15 minutes was enough, and then we give you 10 minutes for this one. But this is only one question for this first breakout session. And we didn't have this in here to begin with, but then we started talking about what a great job teachers do with building connections. This is a particular strength of so many educators, and we've seen such wonderful things that teachers have done as far as building different types of connections. So we really wanted to give you the opportunity to share with each other in small groups some of your ideas for building meaningful connections with students and with families. And then we're anxious to have some of you report out in the chat that you did yesterday. And we've mentioned a couple times, we were talking to Carol earlier, we just are very impressed by this group of educators. We wish we had the opportunity to be interacting with you face to face, just very on it when it comes to what we're talking about. So take, oh, it looks like we're joining a breakout room. I was gonna say, take a screenshot. Let me read it in case you can't see all of it right now. So it should say, how do you build meaningful connections with your students and their families? What are some additional ways you can develop personal connections with your underserved gifted students and their families in particular? So just an opportunity to share for a few minutes, and then we'll ask if, as you come back, if there are things that you would like to share from. I was looking back over the chat while you were in discussion rooms, and Eileen pointed out that she likes asking them about their names. Why were you named? What does it mean? And I think that's a great example of a way to get at some history of the child, the family, to make that connection. So that's a fun idea also. Was there anything from your discussions about building meaningful relationships that really stuck with you, that jumped out to you that you'd like to share with the group? Put that in the chat if there's anything you'd like to share at this point. The importance of joy, the joy of learning. Yes, we believe so strongly in that. Learning has to be joyful for everyone involved when possible. Letters between teachers, student, parents. Respecting families, communication needs. Many prefer text to phone calls. Families have a wealth of skills and knowledge. The humor. In our group, we all agreed we established good connections with kids, but need more ideas on how to do so with parents. We do need to be aware of adopted and foster children that may not know why they were named the way they were, or that answer might be painful. Same with family trees. And I think that's true with every activity that we do. We have to go into it with compassion and let them know that they complete what they feel comfortable completing, and that if they don't want to, that is completely okay. And if you know that there are specific concerns with certain groups of kids or even specific individuals, you are certainly well within your rights to take out particular questions that you know might trigger difficult emotions. So that's a really good reminder for all of us. In group 4, some of the teachers did the following to get to know the students and their families. Family surveys, potlucks. Food is great for bringing families in and getting to know them. connecting families, making a cookbook together, reading and having evening programs to showcase what they learned. Great ideas. Laura, is it Bartolucci? Shared that she does a unit about superheroes that help students discover their best ways of learning. Provide a welcoming environment that focuses on what everyone brings to the classroom. Texting, dojoing? I don't know what that is. Parents regularly. Newsletter, start building from the beginning when a child is referred. International Children's Day, students research their families and activities to support it. Finding a balance between communicating and overwhelming them, very important. Many of us do interest surveys with students and parents. I liked how one of my group members said it was important to tread lightly with parents, humility, until she got to know them better. Seeing the student outside of the classroom, sports, theater, community activities, that means so much to them. We talked about really bringing humanity back into education, having joy, empathy, flexibility. I love all of these. This is particularly difficult this year. This is a challenging year all around. I do think pandemic has been wonderful for increased empathy. We are all struggling, so I've seen gruff teachers become more flexible and understanding. Holding presentation parties was always such a powerful way to get students feeling pride in their work and self. Class Dojo is, oh, thank you. Class Dojo is a communication and educational tool for schools. Okay, I've used a couple different ones. So like GroupMe or one of those maybe. I'm gonna have to look that up. One of my group members spends time in the community of where he teaches to get to see and meet parents and students. Those are all just wonderful. I'm so glad that you have the opportunity to share with each other and to share with us. We appreciate it. Okay, so we're gonna move to what was next on that earlier slide, building a safe and inclusive classroom environment. First part of this is developing positive classroom norms. I think the key word in here is positive. It's really easy sometimes to state what you want in a way that's negative, but phrasing it positively is so important. So I think the example I can think of is more a rule, well, it would be a classroom rule than a norm, but we would want to say something like, we listen until it is our turn to talk instead of we don't interrupt. Modeling patience, flexibility, respect, and empathy for students helps to build a safe and inclusive classroom environment. Modeling is a key word here. We know that everything hinges on adult behavior and actions in the classroom, so we need to consistently model the behavior that we hope to see in our students. Role play appropriate responses and respectful dialogue with students. The role play here is really important, especially early in that process. I love to be able to engage students in class-wide or small group deep discussions on different things, but I would always at the very beginning take time to set up, to role play how you would do that. So it was so that it was a safe space, so that they knew how to challenge what someone else has said without being hurtful, and how to get their opinion across in an appropriate way. So we would start with things like, I would just make a statement that Thursday is the best day of the week because it is double star day at Starbucks. And then they would have to validate that. Well, I can see why you would think, I know you love coffee. I can see why this would be the best day of the week for you, but from my perspective here is, and so it's role playing and putting some of those things in place. It's not just talking about them, but giving them a chance to actually practice it, to build that safe environment where they can have these meaningful interactions and these deep discussions that help build connections. Build student self-confidence through positive, genuine affirmations. Anyone that has worked with kids for very long knows that they are very good at finding the disingenuous. They can pick that out so quickly. It's so powerful for them to have something, a genuine positive statement from you. Even something as simple as, I noticed that you really put a lot of detail into that presentation. So they know that you saw it and it mattered to you. This is more powerful than a blanket statement of, you did a great job on that assignment. And it's not that you can't necessarily lead with that. You did a great job on that assignment. I noticed that you put so much detail in that, but you really want to bring it back to them, put it on them, not your judgment of what they've done necessarily, but to help them recognize what they did that was positive through a genuine affirmation. Oh, I have a side note on that just popped into my head as far as giving feedback. As we are working in this online environment, trying to figure out how to make things meaningful, beneficial for kids, I came across just a mini study that students found it so much more impactful to receive positive feedback, just little blurbs of positive feedback that was recorded. So you would record it and give it to them, and that was so much more powerful than a written statement. And I just thought that was so interesting, and something that we might be able to incorporate more since we're doing so much online learning. So that is just a bonus for you. The last one that we have on here is to employ predictable routines and rituals in our classroom to increase stability and a sense of community. We know that this is good for all students, that the predictability that comes with a safe classroom. We know that it's more important for students who may be initially hesitant to engage. So it helps to create safety for those students. We also know that it's really important for students that are impacted by trauma in any way, and that can even be the trauma of chronic poverty. So these are just some reminders of things that help to really build that safe, inclusive classroom environment where we can start to understand the strengths of our students.
And Amy, I did want to add, so with the developing the classroom norms, I had the opportunity like a little over a year ago to teach writing to middle and high school students in China. And so this was one of the first activities we did. And we did the norms together in both languages and posted them just to honor just different languages within. And so it could be, that there are more languages within a classroom, but that the norms would be displayed in multiple languages. So that was just one idea that I wanted to share. Also, about the respectful responses, I had once, seen a video that really just hit me pretty hard, and I shared it with my students when I was teaching an undergraduate special education course. And it was a student, with a disability that was talking about how sometimes like teachers, they would just, they would joke, or they would, almost maybe even in an effort to build camaraderie, kind of make sarcastic comments or different things like that before really knowing their students and making sure that things like that were okay. And this particular student had made the comment that, so for that, teacher, that person or that peer, after that class ends, I mean, that comment's done. But for the person who's been affected by it, that comment can go on for quite some time and cause some harm. So I just wanted to put that in there when we're talking about respectful dialogue.
So is it echoing? Oh, we're good now. Okay, we pulled some examples of positive classroom norms. I know we spent a lot of time talking about this, but we really feel that this type of activity shows your students that you value their input on the classroom community, what it needs to be for everyone involved. And it asks them to consider how their treatment toward others and their general attitudes promote such a community. So it puts some of the impetus back on them to create what they see to be the ideal. And it is ideal to be able to have take the time to develop the classroom norms. It is a process that takes a little bit of time. I know realistically, sometimes based on just the particular group of students you have or the time limitations that you have, that it's not always possible to start from ground zero with this and fully build it out. So one idea would be to have a couple of non-negotiable, or what would be non-negotiable for positive classroom norms in your mind, and then give them the opportunity to talk about, this is what it looks like in our class. this is what it sounds like in our class. So very specific, and then maybe over time add some others, but that draws them into the process too, even if you're at the point where you just can't start from ground zero brainstorming. Does anyone have other positive classroom norms that they have developed with their students or that they found work really well to build that community that they want to share?
Yes, I have it's Mary. Hi, I'm Mary Carmen. So I have one activity that I did like for like, it's my third year in Gifted. So I use the approach, what is it called? Teach like a champion, is nurture your heart. So what I did with the student is I make a big heart and I cut it in pieces, and then everybody they have to write their own greatness, the positive words, but then also for the norms, and I put the pieces together in the classroom. And of course, we make a big heart with all the greatness. And this is our first. I always start with the units, the greatness of me. That is the unit that we deal with. What I do with the students. But this year it was different. This year was very, of course, but yeah.
Thank you for sharing. So that's an opportunity for them to share their strengths, for you to validate them. And then there's this visual that becomes part of the classroom community and helps develop those connections. Let's see, we've got some others popping up over here. Pandemic has changed the way educators do things. We have to be more flexible. If I don't say you can't, then you can. Okay, so just a general guideline for the class. One person talks at a time in a discussion, stated positively. Class motto, that would be fun. We encourage positive feedback, wonder. I like the wonder. Questions and recommendations, all done in a careful way and with respect. I had my students answer questions about what they do outside of school, their interests, something interesting about them, and what they'd like to learn this school year. They recorded their responses on Flipgrid. Students compliment each other's work contributions. Always just great ideas from this group. Thank you so much for being willing to share. Let's see. I think this list is pretty straightforward. I'm just gonna put it up. We'll put it up there and let you look at it. I don't know that there's a lot of discuss. Oh, we put it up there really quickly. You got that? Moving on. Movement we know is important. The advocacy piece for your students is important. Encouraging all members to help each other work collectively towards success during group activities. We don't believe every activity needs to be a group activity. There are definitely times when students need to be grouped in order to move at an appropriate pace and dig in an appropriate depth into activities, but there are definitely times where we need to use those groups to build community. And within those, we need to work so that everyone's successful. And then connections again, over and over again, connections to students' culture and lived experiences during the learning activities and class discussions.
So this is another activity from the book that actually originated with one of our co-authors, Dr. Jean Lee. So we wanted to share this with you. So it's called Honoring Small Requests. So occasionally throughout the school year, ask your students to list small requests that would help them learn better in your classroom. Try honoring as many of these requests as possible, any that seem reasonable within the context of your classroom, and validate your students by letting them know that you're doing so. So something, it seems so simple, but can make a huge difference and show students that you care. So I'm going to share a more detailed example with you. So it was the third time we'd met as a small group when Kate, a 10th grader with autism spectrum disorder, who is also identified as gifted, made a simple request during a timed essay writing activity. If you don't mind, could you please take the clock off the wall? I'm bothered by the noise. I just can't concentrate. No problem, I can do it, the teacher said. Oh, thank you, she replied, looking surprised. When I took out the batteries, she said, I asked my homeroom teacher to do the same thing and she refused. This surprised me for two reasons. First, a ticking clock can be annoying to anyone. Second, why wouldn't a teacher want to help a student concentrate on a learning activity by simply removing a distraction in the background? I wondered how many small requests of this kind had been voiced by students, and how many of them have been addressed by teachers. And this was an actual example from a teacher. And I know, Amy, you had, I think, an example too that you wanted to share.
Well, we were just, oh, sorry. As we were pulling this together, we were talking about how this probably happens a lot more than we recognize that it does. And I was talking to a high school student just last week, and and understandably, teachers are trying to figure out how to make things work for their students online now. And I completely 100% get that. And that was a conversation that we had also. But he had recorded the directions to activities, and there were things that they had to do throughout the entire recorded, and they were like 45 minutes long. And she just picks up on things so quickly. She's one of those kids that needs to hear it once and she's got it, as opposed to multiple examples over and over and over and over. But it was set so that you couldn't go at a faster speed and you couldn't move forward. You had to sit and listen to every single word on that at the appropriately spoken pace in order to get to the next activity that had to be completed for her to get full credit on the assignment. And she had just asked, she said, is there any way that I can fast forward or just listen to this faster so that I can get to the questions to answer them and don't have to listen to the directions over and over again? And his response was something like, just because you're proficient at this doesn't mean that you get special treatment. And I thought, oh, that would have been so easy for him to say, yeah, let's fix this so that you can get what you need out of it. Show me what you know, and you don't have to listen to my explanation over and over. And his immediate response was, no way am I doing that. So just another example where something small like that just validates your students and shows them that you value what they're asking, and that opens that communication and creates a safe space for future requests that may really benefit a child in helping you to get to know them. I know, Jenny, you had a story too, but yours is more personal. Did you want to share?
I just am going to add on to what you said, because it was something you and I had talked about before. And children need the opportunity to develop their advocacy skills and to develop their self-efficacy and being able to advocate. And so when things like this happen, are they going to advocate again for themselves and what they need in the future? Chances are they're going to possibly internalize what happened and not, feel comfortable, making that request, in the future. So this idea of honoring small requests, of, helping others within your community at your school to also get on board with this idea. I mean, it could even be, once we're back, in classrooms, like a box in the classroom, that's kind of an ongoing thing. I think is such important validation for students and helps them to build those self-advocacy skills. My, personal example, was just, last week, my son just felt really discouraged, and he's in middle school. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Scratch coding, but, they were going to do this big unit on Scratch coding, and he had asked if he's done this now for several years, if he would be able to work on this Unity coding program that he had done, last year with a group of students. And the response, from the teacher was, well, unless we can all do it, then nobody's going to do it. And it just feeling discouraged instead of, finding a way, to support him, it could really impact students' engagement and motivation for learning. So I saw a couple comments in here that I wanted to So I had a student with Tourette's and who would constantly tap his pencil in his feet, which would really bother other students. We just put a folded cloth under his pencil and had him take off his shoe. This made him happy and allowed everyone else to concentrate. So again, getting creative, with ways to support students while, not also, drawing attention, to them. I think that's a great example. There's another one that just came in. I had a regular ed teacher embarrass a student and her mom in an IEP. Her mom got tearful, making a big deal about chewing on her pencil. We need to remember to just problem solve and not shame students. Absolutely, because remember, that lives on with them. I mean, that permeates other experiences that they have. I think that's a really important point. So what do you say to a kid who you have trained to advocate for themselves, and then they get a response like your son did from the teacher? And I think that's where, that family connection and supporting families and also doing this work with their children is extremely important. I have a privilege as a parent that I'm constantly aware of. I know Amy, the same thing, where, we have just the background that we have. So when things like this arise, we can help reframe, what the issue is and say, well, okay, so you're going to do this. Do you want me to say something? No, fine, then I'm not. Do you want to try to talk to your teacher a different way? Try to problem solve it, let them own it. So maybe that's work as teachers that we need to integrate when we teach self-advocacy skills is, well, what if you don't get the response that you're expecting? Then how should you respond to that? Because we don't want that to prevent you from self-advocating in the future.
I have a comment too. Are you able to hear me? Everyone's locked up on my screen. Can you hear me okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. As an adult, if it's possible, either as a classroom teacher or even as a parent at times, but especially if you're in the building and you're working with kids to self-advocate, if you can make the first contact with that adult and let them know what is happening so that it's being set up as a positive experience for the child, that's important if it's possible. So to kind of give them a heads up in addition to coaching the child to self-advocate.
That's a great point. So here's just a couple more activities. So this is a safe climate checklist that we developed. So this is for classroom and school community in general, just to get, do we ask kids? I think we send home climate surveys at home. Do we ask kids how they feel about their learning environments? And so this is what this is aimed to do. So, do visuals, displays, and classrooms books represent all students in the classroom and in the larger community, region, and country? Do students, teachers, school staff, and families communicate respectfully with one another? Do students feel empowered and supported by their teachers? And so the next slide that we're going to show you is the student kind of version where we ask them these questions. So do all students feel that they belong and that their peers, teachers, and community accept them? Do I model patience, flexibility, respect, and empathy for my students? So I misspoke, I skipped ahead to the next one. But for this one, this is for you to kind of do just an overall survey of how you feel to kind of make sure that you're addressing some of these aspects of safe climate. And again, the full activity is in Padlet. It can be modified. It's a great activity to share just for others to, just kind of go through and say, okay, maybe these are areas I need to work on, this year. So we definitely wanted to make sure you had that. This is the student version that's really important. So we call this the Empowered to Learn checklist. So you respond to each statement by writing an X in the appropriate box. So there's kind of that Likert scale. So always, sometimes, or never. If you'd like to comment on your response, you can do that. This is a fillable form, and we actually did put up the fillable forms for you. So my teacher encourages and supports me to learn as much as I can. Always, sometimes, never. Our classroom is structured so that I can learn best. Materials are available, good classroom management. Some of these, depending on the age that you're teaching, depending on different things, you might need to reword some of these statements. So this is just to get you started. There are times I can choose what I learn. There are times I can choose how I learn. There are times I can choose how I demonstrate what I've learned. I feel comfortable asking for what I need to help me learn better. And it's important with any activity like this that, you know, obviously you want to have a classroom that's safe enough where students feel like they can give this feedback. We have to remember we're the adults. We don't want to get defensive about these types of things. This is to help us improve, to help us grow. And we want our students to know that we value their impact and their input. We value their feedback, and that we want to make the space that they're learning in, you know, the safest space that we possibly can. Amy, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you covered that well.
And this is much longer. And again, it's in the Padlet.
Okay, the last section here that we're specifically going to talk about is conveying and supporting high expectations. We need to believe in our students' potential and consistently convey this belief to them. Holding high expectations, however, does not mean we ignore the challenges these students are facing. Having high expectations without providing the support that they need to be successful is just as detrimental as not having those high expectations for them to begin with, or can be. And lowering those expectations may damage their self-confidence and self-efficacy, which continues to impact them in the future. I have an example from a research study that we did a couple years ago of a student, and I was actually going to look, I think she was from New Mexico. And in her conversation with us, she talked about, she's a second language learner. Excuse me. She's a second language learner. She and her brother were being raised by her grandmother. She was working at least 2 jobs outside of taking a full load of advanced coursework in order to help the family pay bills, but she was also diligently trying to put money away for college. She was very set on attending college. She hit a stretch where she missed almost a month of school because of complication with an illness. When she came back, she scheduled appointments with her teachers to try and get caught up, because she really felt like she needed that foundation to continue doing well in her classes and to prepare her for college. And with the best of intention, I truly believe these teachers were just trying to be as compassionate as they possibly could with what they understood to be the circumstance. But repeatedly, they told her, we'll just not worry about this last month of school. Just don't worry about it. Let's just pick up here and go on. And she was really, really hurt. She felt like they didn't believe that she was capable of catching up at this point, and that by trying to protect her, ultimately they were hurting her. So there was that understanding on their part, but that holding high expectations and then supporting her to get there was not something that was happening, and that was hurtful to her. So that was an example that I thought of as we were working through this presentation. Okay, here's your 15-minute breakout activity. So same format as we've done with the others. We want to give you a chance to share with each other, and then we'd love to hear a little bit about what you discussed. Questions, if you want to take a screenshot or jot them down, think about them for just a minute, and then you'll be able to go into discussion groups. What are some ways teachers and staff might inadvertently convey low expectations to their underserved high potential students? What ideas do you have to help others authentically convey to their students that they believe in their potential? What are things you have done or seen others do that help to establish a safe and inclusive environment in which students and their families feel comfortable sharing? I want to jump back over to the chat for just a minute before we give you an opportunity to put more in the chat. I had another thought on the advocacy that we were talking about earlier. And Jenny, I don't think you said this. I know we've talked about it, but I think it's also important that if that were to happen, if a child were to advocate and not get a positive response from the adult involved, that they understand that this, if it was done, if they'd been coached and it was done in a thoughtful, appropriate manner, that this is an adult issue at that point, that it's not a reflection on them, and that if you can help them understand too, teachers put so much time and effort into preparing lessons, into trying to make everything good for the students in their classes. It's just a natural defensive response, I think, to hear that maybe something that you're trying to do is not working well for students. So providing that context for them, I think, is helpful too, letting them know that it's not necessarily about them. And then there were some other good comments over here about creative problem solving. My son was a constant doodler. It would drive many of his teachers crazy. He's an amazing artist. His AP history teacher took his drawings and put them on the wall and had my son doodle about the topics. This really made him feel validated because he got in trouble for it for most of his school career. So really highlighting those strengths and using those to build on and get to know him. And then I had a student who constantly chewed his hair. He got a stick of gum when he came into my room. I asked the gen ed teacher to support this too. So creative problem solving that just made life easier probably for everyone involved. And then a comment that's where our knowledge of parents, students is important, as well as asking students what they thought would be best. Sometimes that might be absolutely the best thing to do. So continued thoughtful comments from everyone. Is there anything that you would like to share from the discussion that you just finished having? I put an actual mailbox in my classroom to allow students to send positive mail to any classmate or teacher and to encourage them to share information, questions, concerns, requests with me. Cutting out the face-to-face piece helped many shy students feel comfortable to share. So fun idea. The compliment project was a powerful end-of-year activity. I've done similar. Is that where like a name's on a piece of paper and everyone adds a compliment to the student or something similar to that?
Yes, in my case, it was the whiteboard, and they sit in front of the whiteboard facing away, and the kids have a few minutes to write, what they think about that particular student, and then they get to get up and turn around and read what everybody in their class thinks about them. And so I actually had to scaffold. How do you write something nice about a person, kind of give them sentence stems and things, because it really had never happened a lot to them. So it was really powerful. So.
Yeah. So again, that coaching, that modeling, that role playing is really important for setting that up. And I've seen those types of activities bring kids to tears too. It's that impactful, or it can be that impactful.
Oh yeah, mine were sobbing, most of them. So yeah.
Low iReady reading scores are not always reflective of ability or giftedness. Absolutely true. Some teachers automatically dismiss a student with low iReady scores. That's where advocacy really can help. Good point. We are 100% free and reduced. Let children be children. The parents are in prison. She wouldn't know how to do that. Oh, so this is like excuses that people use in order to not hold high expectations. Where's the rigor? Fifth grade teacher letting her students come to virtual class in pajamas and from their beds. Eating, communicating our expectations, and then helping students understand them. Helping them understand them is so important. It's all about relationships. Yes, if you have genuine relationships with your kids, they will be more responsive to expectations. 100% agree with that. Home visits allow teachers to get to be in the student home and to see for themselves what is truly valued. A great and humbling experience. I love that. One way to help students believe in potential is getting the whole school on board with growth mindset. Again, we love your comments. We so appreciate your involvement in these discussions. Oh, thank you. So this slide provides me opportunities for meaningful engagement. This has kind of been ongoing through the discussions that you've shared and what we've been talking about. But I think as educators, at least 99.9%, I would imagine, really what they want is to see their students actively involved in their own learning, growing academically and socially, and happy to be part of a classroom community. Getting to know your students well enough to tap into their strengths and interests is key. Again, this is just kind of restating some of what we've already discussed. Embedding opportunities for real world learning opportunities that are relevant to your students is important. Providing opportunities for students to make choices regarding what they learn and how they learn it can be very, very impactful in including them in the learning and creating meaningful engagement opportunities. Do you have anything else on that, Jenny? That was kind of quick. You good?
I don't, but I did want to go back to the comments because there were a couple in there that I definitely wanted to touch on. And what you just discussed, we'll talk about a little bit more on this slide as well. We are nearing the end of the presentation, so meaningful engagement is the last area that we're going to talk about with you. But there was a comment sharing success stories of famous people who had personal struggles, such as LD, ADD. We have, I believe, a lesson related to that in the book. I think that's a great activity. I show an inspiring person video each week, people who overcome obstacles, people with disabilities, people doing kind things, people from diverse backgrounds. Another really, really great idea. We celebrate Diversity Awareness, Disability Awareness Month, and the students lead a school-wide project. So just really getting them involved, you know, building kind of awareness, empathy. I really wanted to just make sure I highlighted some of the comments that were going on there. So more tips to promote meaningful engagement. Encouraging students to generate questions, teaching them how to do that when they do not understand content due to lack of prior knowledge. This is a really good self-regulation task. I do a lot of research with just underachievement. That has been an area of focus of mine for, I would say, over a decade now. And, you know, one of the things I constantly tell people is we assume that our students know how to self-regulate. They know how to, you know, approach, like when they're stuck, they know what to do. They know, you know, how to study. They know like a strategy like this where they kind of, you know, write down questions, move on to like the next, and then a little bit later when they feel comfortable, like ask for help. We sometimes make these assumptions. Self-regulation skills like this are things we should be teaching, and we should be teaching them pretty early on in a child's education. And making sure that, you know, we're not calling them out, you know, to ask questions when they may not know the answers, that they're volunteering, and that when they do ask for help, you know, it's when they feel like most comfortable doing so. But another activity I've done, and I don't have it in here, is I created just a little plaque card that was laminated that had emojis, and students, they can put it in their agenda, they can have it on their desk, they can use a dry erase marker, and it's basically just to constantly check in with them of where they are with a particular task that they're working on. So I think like one of the, and I'm happy to share it with you if you email me, or I can put it in the Padlet, but it's, you know, I feel like I'm feeling challenged, you know, but I can handle it, or this is a little bit too tough for me, or this is too easy for me, and they can kind of know. And you know, I would have students just every now and then periodically in the class as a way for me to check kind of where they are, and then that would also help me to know, okay, well, that student's probably not going to feel comfortable if I call on them to respond to this particular question. So just emotional literacy activity that would be good. Provide both cognitive and affective feedback. So you know, a lot of times, and Amy just gave just good examples when talking about feedback. We miss that affective piece when we're providing feedback. So it can be a little bit demoralizing when students do put in a tremendous amount of effort, but the only rubric or response they receive is related to the final product and not to the process that was involved in getting to that final product. So providing, you know, specific affective feedback, you know, related to things like persistence or, you know, persevering, can be really meaningful to students to acknowledge that, you know, you saw different things that were really wonderful going on during that process that, you know, you want to celebrate, you want to give them feedback about. Providing varied examples of student assignments, demonstrating various ways to complete assignments, because we don't have to complete an assignment necessarily the same way. There might be different approaches to completing assignments. So try to include exemplars that resonate with students' cultural, linguistic, and lived experience. So diverse exemplars to show them how different students may be approached in assignment. During lessons, use examples that incorporate aspects of students' daily lives and communities. And again, we have to know our students first before we can ever do this. I mean, we don't make assumptions. We don't want to be disingenuous. We want to honestly know our students, different experiences they may have, things about their community to make the learning relevant, to take that time to get to know them. And when appropriate, let them shine and teach the class what they learned. This will provide them with an opportunity to take ownership of their learning. I can't remember where this came from, but it's this idea of like a scholar identity. We want to help our students feel, like scholars and grow into owning that. I will say, we don't want to put students on the spot. If they're not comfortable presenting, in front of entire class, they may, have somebody else that they would like to maybe, share their knowledge with, do it on a smaller scale, share it with you. How they share it should be up to them. So giving them choices and ownership in that, but really emphasizing and trying to cultivate that scholar identity, I think is really important. Amy, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I'm good with what you said.
So this is professional learning priorities that we just want you to take a moment and reflect on. So we did this yesterday. The full version for the Understand Me chapter is up in Padlet. We're just going to give you some of the items. So beginning, a B, you're aware and you want to try. Developing, you would put a D, you have tried and or trying. And leading, you would put an L, you are consistently aware, implementing changes and making others aware. So the first one we want you to think about, I make a special effort to know the underserved, gifted, high potential students in my classroom, both in and out of school. I take extra steps to know my students' family members and respectfully communicate with them. I set high performance expectations for my underserved, and this says gifted students, but we want to re-emphasize the fact that that label doesn't have to be there, for us to be doing this work. So we're wanting to cultivate potential, see potential, nurture potential in all of our students. And so we just want to re-emphasize that. So I set high performance expectations for my underserved gifted students and hold them accountable for meeting those expectations, and also giving them the support if they need it in order to help them meet those expectations. I believe in the potential of all my students and affirm this to them regularly can mean so much to a child. I foster a supportive classroom community that honors students' unique characteristics and encourages learner empowerment. I encourage learner empowerment. So just go through and just kind of jot down, are you beginning? Are you developing? Are you leading in those areas?
Jennifer, can I ask a question out loud instead of typing it? So I guess I'm really getting caught up in the semantics of things. If you're calling them an underserved gifted student, aren't they being served if they've been identified? So are we talking about, so what exactly, they're in gifted program, but they're still not getting their needs met?
No. So yeah, that's a great question. We, many of these students in our current gifted identification practices, there will be many false negatives, and we acknowledge that. So we talk about gifted potential because some of these students may not have had the opportunities, the resources, the different things that would potentially lead for that, help them to do, for example, well on like a test, or maybe the test or the instruments that were given are not responsive, to the students and not aligning with different aspects of the students to really showcase, their potential and their ability. So for the sake of the book, we were asked to use the terminology underserved, gifted, but Amy and I, and Amy can jump in on this as well, we often use the term just high potential because of our sensitivity to the fact that there are just so many false negatives where we're not serving these kids, we're not seeing these kids. And the first chapter is all about ways to try to see these kids, whether they're formally identified or not. Does that help?
That helps. So we're more talking about, like, here, it's our talent pool kids. Maybe they missed it by a couple points, or they,
it's both, right? It's inclusive of both. So, I mean, you can have kids in talent pool, you can have kids that are being served that we still need to be doing this extra work with, but we would also add that there are kids that just aren't being seen at all for whatever reason. So it's giving us our hope through this is that we'll walk in and we'll start looking for things that maybe we weren't looking for before. We'll be more sensitive, we'll be more aware, so that, the school-wide enrichment model is fantastic about giving students opportunities, whether they're formally identified or not. We never want an identification label to preclude a student getting services. However, if they have the identification label, we do also want to make sure that they're receiving the services that they need. So we're trying to be as inclusive as possible, if that helps.
okay, that clarifies. Thank you.
Yes. Amy, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I thought you expressed our philosophy very, very well.
Yeah. And when you're writing a book, I mean, there are certain things that you're asked to do just to simplify, be more straightforward, but that is basically what we strongly, strongly believe as educators, that we need to be constantly looking and mining for that potential, in addition to serving the students that have already been identified. So that is the end of this presentation.